WNT. I'm Robin Vincent. We've been discussing addiction with specific attention to food. But the stuff we get at the market, the sugar and spice and everything that seems so nice, is, of course, not the only thing creating modern addictive behaviors. Research shows social media activates the same dopamine-driven reward pathways in the brain as addictive substances. The scroll, the like, the notification. Each one is a small hit of pleasure that keeps you coming back. The U.S. Surgeon General has warned that teens who use social media for more than 3 hours a day face double the risk of depression and anxiety. And the vast majority of young people are using social media. Now, the courts are getting involved. In Los Angeles, a jury is hearing claims that Meta and YouTube deliberately designed their platforms to addict children. In New Mexico, the state attorney general is suing Meta for allegedly failing to protect minors from sexual exploitation. At the same time, here in Michigan, legislators are cracking down on phones in schools. This month, Michigan bans smartphones in the classroom, which will affect students in the fall. So what should lawmakers do to prevent corporations from addicting us to their platforms? To discuss this, we have Mark Tisdall here. He's a Republican representing Rochester Hills in the state legislature, and he sponsored the cell phone ban that is now law in Michigan. Representative Tisdall, welcome back.
Oh, good morning, Robin. It's good to be back.
So last time we had you on the show, we discussed the cell phone ban you were working on. The state legislature hasn't passed a lot of legislation. As of July, it's only passed 6 bills in 6 months. But your bill did pass. Why do you think this legislation, the smartphone ban in classrooms, was successful?
Well, I took time with it. My first draft was in June of 2023, and then I started talking to people, administrators, principals, teachers, members with education experience on the other side of the aisle, members within my own caucus. And over time, we put together a bill that generated a consensus. It was 99-9 in the House and 34-1 in the Senate. And you don't just do that on your own. You pull other people in and you give them ownership in the final product.
Let's talk for one moment about those numbers, 99-9 and 34-1.
34-1.
34-1, thank you.
In the Senate.
What was the opposition? Because first of all, I want to acknowledge that there aren't a lot of issues that bring folks together in this way on both sides of the aisle. And before we talk more about that, I am curious what people were pushing back against.
Well, the initial pushback was from parents and concern that they wouldn't be able to contact their child in the event of an emergency. Mm-hmm. And we addressed that. And Senator Pohanke's bill requires schools to train in their emergency drilling what the cell phone protocols are. And so we got that addressed. And then the other no votes, primarily on my side of the aisle that I'm aware of, is just the intrusion on local control. Mm-hmm. Is this something that we need to be telling the schools to do? And if you include the 293 charters and academies, we have 886 school districts, administrative entities in the state of Michigan. And my point has always been, if you were going to wait for them to design, implement, and firmly enforce without a state requirement, you'd be waiting an awful long time. And so we created state minimum standards, and they can all be more strict than the standards, and many school districts already are.
Representative Tisdall, we know that Republicans by and large want to see more local control. Does this speak then to the gravity of the issue, the fact that many were able to set aside concerns about local control?
Indeed, and as you talked about, I never thought about the analogy of food to smartphone addiction, but both just the feel and the touch of smartphones and the smooth glass, and then, as you indicated, the design of the
likes,
social media
the
sites themselves.
notifications.
Yes, they are both processed foods and social media are both engineered to be addictive, to keep you coming back and to give you that instant
Dopamine spike.
gratification that creates an addiction. Governor Hochul out of New York was the first that I heard really emphasize the fact that the smartphones and social media was addicted. And when you cross that line in your brain, this is an addictive product, it's addictive software, then the question becomes, where do we allow our children to carry an addictive product? Where do we allow our children to carry an addictive software? And for me, that lights up a whole new level of cognition and thought about what it is we're up against.
Well, say more about that. I mean, I'm wondering what inspired you to work on this bill in the first place. You keep talking about concerns
Yes.
for kids who are holding these very addictive devices in their hands. Do you have personal experience with kids in your life or yourself?
Well, with adults, you see it every day. In fact, what was kind of comical when I was giving testimony on the smartphone ban during instruction time bill in the House in the Education Committee, there was a picture of me giving testimony. Every single person in the gallery was looking at their cell phone. So we all have a problem with it. Adults can be held responsible for their own outcomes. Children, their parents will end up being responsible. So you have to give the parents some responsibility on the front end. But I've been studying this issue following Jonathan Haidt, Haidt, out of New York University.
Who we've had on this show.
Yes, wonderful work. He's been writing about this for 7 years. But you get in schools in particular, loneliness, which is a precursor to anxiety, to depression, to self-harm, to ideation, to attempts and completions. It's all there in black and white. The science is in. This is not guesswork anymore. And there are any multiple of studies since 2019 that use the word causation. So this is not a mystery. But it's all really relatively new. 2011, the iPhone 4 was the first one with the forward-facing camera for selfies. 2012, Facebook bought Instagram, which
the
is
forward-facing camera changed
that's
everything
right.
for us narcissists.
That's right, and then
didn't
it creates that direct opportunity to seek improvement, to seek
approval,
to seek likes, to get positive feedback, or quite often negative feedback, and it's just and with teen and tween girls in particular, reputational sabotage is how they go after the people they don't like, and that's where you see the greatest harm. And Jonathan Haidt will tell you we're in our 13th year of mental health crisis among our teen and tween girls.
It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. My guest is State Representative Mark Tisdall. He's a Republican out of Rochester Hills. We're discussing a smartphone ban in classrooms, which will go into effect in Michigan in the fall, in addition to Meta and TikTok being on trial for harmfully addicting people to their platforms. We're going to talk a little bit more about what role lawmakers should be playing in standing up to big tech next. Stay with us. WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. My guest is State Representative Mark Tisdall. He's a Republican out of Rochester Hills, and he sponsored a law that will go into effect this fall that bans smartphones in Michigan schools. We're discussing what this all means in terms of lawmakers and policy and how they can potentially stand up to big tech. Representative Tisdall, before we get into that, though, I'm wondering, do you know anyone who's detoxed from these platforms and what happened in their lives? Have you tried to do that? Are you walking the walk as much as you're talking the talk right now?
Well, this is something my wife Susan and I talk about all the time, and it's a big part of my work. You know, we have WhatsApp applications, we have a whip application, changes in the daily schedule and the agenda come down all the time. New information on bills that are pending and considerations of support or opposition happen all the time, and you catch yourself. If you're watching a sporting event on television and there's a commercial, you catch yourself going to your phone.
Yeah,
to see,
one screen to the next.
Absolutely, and so we have six grandchildren, and we're trying to work with our children who are in their 40s, and work with the grandchildren in that understanding of the parents have to be on top of it. They have to have the authority and the willingness to get involved because they're going to have the responsibility to pick up the pieces on the back end when things go bad.
Representative Tisdall, do your 40-something kids show any level of openness to this? Are they willing to model this kind of behavior?
They understand it much better than we do. My daughter is in that business. She works for Meredith Publishing, which I think is now called Time, and she's responsible for the search bar on many of the magazines, including O and Home and Garden and those kinds of things that are all digital now.
Which means she has to be attached to screens, to her phone, to her laptop.
That is her job. But as we look to the future. And you brought up the lawsuits out in California. This is going to be the new tobacco settlement because they're going to go after the big tech companies because they have the money. And so it's very tempting to do that. But here in Michigan, there are a couple of things there are two other bills that I'm working on that I've presented. One would require age verification in order to open a social media account.
I have to tell you, Representative Tisdall, they have tried to do that. They're trying to do that. They have done that in Australia.
And they banned.
Well,
for 16 under. They closed 4.7 million accounts.
But children have found a way around that.
There always will be a workaround.
Right.
Right.
And so what I'm trying to get at here, what I'm thinking about is it can't just be trying to regulate hearts and minds. There's got to be another aspect to this as well.
Well, more than anything, it is about changing hearts and making awareness. And again, I always talk about keeping authority and responsibility connected. Minors in the United States cannot consent to legally binding contracts. When you open an account on any of these social media sites, you have to hit their accept use of terms agreement. That's a legally binding contract. Anything that results problematically out of that relationship between the child and the social media account, the parents are going to be responsible for picking up the pieces on the back end. But they have no authority on the front end. That's what has to change. We can't allow these companies to engage our children in legally binding contracts. They're minors.
Representative Tisdall, so it was last April, if I'm correct here, that you sponsored the bill to require social media platforms to verify users' ages and obtain parental consent for anyone under 18.
Mm-hmm.
That was last April, so we're almost getting to the 1-year mark here. Why do you think this bill hasn't gotten a vote yet in the House or Senate?
Well, we've had testimony on it.
Okay.
And there is pushback from institutions with a lot of money.
What kinds of institutions?
Well, Meta, Snapchat, TikTok, Alphabet, you name it. And they don't want to be held responsible. They're following a pattern that alcohol and tobacco followed. Initially, it was the parents' responsibility to keep alcohol and tobacco use away from their kids. And then we realized as a society the parents needed help. And it's the same thing we're realizing here. And they'll fight that tooth and nail because teens and tweens, minors, are valuable marketing data points. And the longer they can keep these kids on and they influence purchasing decisions, where we're going on vacation, what movies are being streamed, what products processed foods are being purchased. That's all a part of it. And the downside, the mental wellness detriment, is less important because it's such a fantastic. They're turning our kids' attention into profits.
We know it's not all negative, though. I mean, part of the reason that social media is appealing is because it's making connection really, really easy. I mean, here in the U.S., we make connecting really hard, especially in Michigan. We don't have good public transit. We live far away from public spaces. A lot of people work many hours and they don't have time to invest in friendships the way that they might like to. Should we be doing more as a collective to write policies that pull us closer, that make it easier for us to connect in real life?
Well, and you know, when you're talking about connections, the virtual connections, Jonathan Haidt will tell you, are almost worthless. In fact, they are more harmful, than helpful. We've got to get back to face-to-face connections.
How?
Well, get kids' noses out of screens for starters.
Okay.
The schools that you go into, I've talked about Avondale Middle School the last time I was on this program. The schools you go into that have a bell-to-bell prohibition, the hallways are loud because kids are talking to each other. The cafeterias are loud because kids are talking to each other. And they're getting back into that face-to-face communication, that constant modulation of my opinion versus your opinion in interpersonal relationships that either anonymously or within a safe distance in a keyboard is missing.
I want to end on something that has been a bit of a theme throughout this conversation, and that is big industries, big tech, big food, big tobacco, and what kind of power we actually have in the face of these giant industries. So what role do you think you have to play here as a state lawmaker in the face of these industries? I mean, when we think about big tech, we also have to think about the battle over data centers, for example, and the role that policymakers can play there. What is your role in all of this?
Well, one of the things I see as chair of the finance committee in the state house is an unlevel playing field. And that's very difficult to create, but there are advantages given to large corporations relative to taxation, accounting obligations, how their work is measured and apportioned for interstate sales, that smaller S-corps, partnerships, LLCs, sole proprietors don't have. And so we need to start addressing some of those disadvantages. You've got the corporate protection from liability that some other entities don't have. And then you've got this.
So you would not like to see corporations treated as people any longer?
Well, corporations are people. Businesses are people. You can't tax a building or a floor. You can only tax the people that own the building or the floor or the machinery. But at some point, let's give everyone a clearer shot. Let's make Michigan the easiest place in the United States to own, operate a business and to raise a family.
State Representative Mark Tisdall is a Republican out of Rochester Hills. Representative Tisdall, thanks for joining me on the Metro.
You are welcome.
This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. And this is the Metro. We'll be right back after the news.